Hello. This is now week 11 of our Imagination in Action series. So God bless you if you stuck with us this long. But we're entering into the final 4 weeks here. So we're shifting to looking forward. We've been developing kind of different themes. And now these last 4 weeks are going to really look at kind of the strategic application of them. How do we put them into practice? What do they look like? That we want to be intentional disciples. In other words, we want to know and have a kind of strategic plan for how we're living as a disciple of Christ. We want that to be kind of built into then a parish of intentional disciples. We want that parish to be able to grow, and we want that growth to be something long-term and sustainable. So we'll kind of be looking at these 4 stages again, kind of our long-term plan, or looking forward, I should say. So this week, I want to look at kind of intentional discipleship, our own personal response as a disciple, a student of Christ. And the media that comes to my mind is the movie Rocky, or really the whole Rocky series. And I think when I think of Rocky Balboa and the movies, Sylvester Stallone and things, the phrase that comes to my mind is training montage. So a training montage, when you see someone, Rocky in this case, running and training and boxing and everything to get ready for the big fights in the different movies. That this is a common trope or kind of cliche in a lot of movies, but Rocky, I think, epitomizes it in a certain way. It's the iconic kind of training scene and the music and everything like that. That it's something that Rocky, in terms of his approach to the fights, is intentional. He doesn't just show up randomly, but you can see in the training, that he's putting his time and his work to be ready to be the best he can be. That this is the type of, I think, kind of intentional approach we're invited to take with our faith. That it's something that can be put on the back burner and just kind of can be haphazard, but that often is not as effective. That when there's that aspect of intentionality, when there's that aspect of kind of a strategic approach to it, can bear much greater fruit. So again, we're looking at kind of the 4 pillars of the church. And so I thought something that would be kind of a way to look at that is, I was thinking back again to a period of growth, a significant period of growth in my kind of life as an intentional disciple was when I was at the University of Illinois Newman Center. And so just kind of thinking about those 4 aspects of the life of the church that we've been looking at from Acts chapter 2, verse 42, in regards to that. So the first was the teaching of the apostles. They dedicated themselves to the teaching of the apostles. I began to study my faith in a deeper way and pay attention to that study. That a lot of times I found that things that I didn't understand or had been confusing, largely it was because I needed to kind of come in contact, I should say, it could be cleared up with some kind of basic or study in the area. That it's not necessarily that it was something I had never learned, but I may have not been paying attention, or maybe when it was explained, I was a younger age and it was explained, in a simpler way because of my age, and I just hadn't heard a more advanced presentation of it or something. But again, just that kind of, we talked about this a lot last week, but studying the faith really helped me to grow a lot in faith, because it cleared up a lot of misunderstandings or things that were just a matter of not needing that better encounter with it again. So myself, I was more interested and attuned to it, and I think received it at a deeper level than I had in other phases in my life. At that time, I would say it was pretty haphazard, though, in the sense that I would occasionally follow certain Catholic websites or things where they'd have articles that helped. But it wasn't a sort of intentional study, but it was still helpful. But for myself, I find now that it's, even as a priest, I continue to want to read and to learn. I find that in the morning, while I'm having morning coffee, is a good time to just read something simple, something short. When I'm driving, I like audiobooks, or maybe working around doing chores or different things, listening to something, short, kind of video things here or there. There's so many good resources out there, but finding what kind of works. What is the best way to engage in that and and be consistent with it. I think if we could spend even just 20 minutes a week, whether that was all at once or kind of split up here and there little bits throughout the week, that would just make a huge impact in that. Then fellowship. I found, during that time living at Newman, of course, there's fellowship with other people in the dorm. But in terms of like Catholic fellowship, there was I got involved with altar serving and the sacristans. So that was fellowship connected with prayer and the sacraments, which was great. I got involved with Knights of Columbus, which also involved, we worked at the soup kitchen and some things. So service, kind of an exterior aspect of fellowship, service in the community, works of mercy. And just other things like that. Becoming friends with other people that were seeking to grow in their faith helped a lot. That for us often could be a make it or break it thing. Are we trying to do it all by our own, or are we connected into community? The sacraments. So I was serving Mass, going on Sundays is kind of the baseline. I started, as I went through, I signed up to serve one weekday Mass a week. So once a week, which most of the time it was the Wednesday noon Mass, I remember, but I would serve that Mass. So I started going to weekday Mass, which gave me another perspective. There's aspects of it that it's more simple. There's more silence, but it helped me to engage Mass in a different way and grow in that connection. I also started going to confession more regularly because it was offered a lot and easy to go to. And so maybe every 4 to 6 weeks, which was great. It helped me, there's a lot more growth that can happen when it's regular versus I usually would go to confession in Lent and Easter, which is a good habit, but that was so much ground to cover that when I started going a little bit more regularly in confession, I could kind of pinpoint certain areas and I saw more growth in response to that. But being able to be in contact with the grace of the sacraments is just so important. It was something that, we go through our whole life growing in our kind of maybe capacity or disposition to receive the graces that we are presented with in the sacraments. But, like a plant in the sun, just being present there, even if a plant isn't able to absorb all of the energy of the sun, there's being present to that source of life and grace in the sacraments is so important. Again, we talked about this and kind of adapting that to our circumstances now. And then finally, prayer. That I had a goal during Lent to pray the rosary every day, and I actually did. It was very difficult, but it really helped to kick off a deeper entrance into the life of prayer. What the rosary did was it in that time as I was able to start to learn to meditate on the mysteries of the rosary, and that became a point of kind of practical application of what I was learning and doing. So it helped to kind of fit together the pieces of what I learned and the theory with my own personal life. It gave me a better clarity, better motivation, to persevere. Growing deeper in prayer was just so important to kind of that, making the whole process work. So again, kind of look at that. And so some aspects of that I see were kind of strategic, where I had a plan and I persevered with it. Other aspects of that were more haphazard, things that just kind of would happen here or there or kind of fell into place randomly. But again, I think the more that I approached it in an intentional way, the more fruitful that could be, and the more it helped to prepare for then at the end of that second year when I felt called to discern seminary. The phrase for kind of a framework of this, of how do we think about a strategic approach to our life of faith that we often use is stewardship. So stewardship is about, again, a framework of intentional discipleship. That the word steward is someone that comes from the idea of the king would put someone in charge or management of part of the kingdom. And so the person was not the king, it's the steward. So I could have done Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is a key theme, that the steward is not the king or the ruler, but is in charge of some of the goods of the kingdom. And so the good steward is the one that utilizes those for the purpose that they're given for, rather than for their own benefit. So, we think about our life, probably our most precious resource is our time. That no matter, the richest to the poorest person in the world has 24 hours a day. And so stewardship is about how do we use that time? How do we use the resources we have? Often we speak of the 3 T's, time, talent, and treasure. A way we can look at that, I think, in terms of this, again, that training montage, like with Rocky, is first looking at time in terms of our own personal investment. How do we invest in our own growth? How are we preparing to be a better disciple? Coming up with a plan. It can be very simple. A plan that is too complicated, a plan that is too much for us to accomplish is not very effective. But coming up with something that's doable, that is, within reach, that can become a habit, again, like finding a time for just some sort of regular study, some, fellowship, time of fellowship within the parish service, time of sacraments, and time of personal prayer. Just coming up with a plan, even as simple, it's more effective if it's something we can stick to rather than, again, a plan that's so grand that we can't follow through with it. Talent. Here we really look exteriorly. How can we serve? Where is it that we can be called to serve? Service is ultimately life-giving in the big picture, even if in the small picture, it's challenging. And there are times of it that are very difficult. But it's something that we're called to do out of love of neighbor, love of God. But again, it's something that also is directed towards that growth. But talent, kind of discerning where and when and how to engage in that. And then treasure, the money that we have, that it's a truth, I think, that there's a certain irony that in a way, in having less desire for wealth, there's a greater joy in the wealth that we do have. Christ often recommends this sort of detachment in the sense of a freedom from greed, a freedom from envy, that these things, just kind of become a vicious cycle. We want more and more, or we become frustrated that others have things we don't, in an unhealthy way. It's not to say that wealth is bad or that it is something that can never be done in the right way, but stewardship in the sense, or I should say, stewardship of treasure is about making sure that our possessions don't control us, making sure that we have that freedom, that use. In the Old Testament, tithing was the recommendation, a giving of 10% of income, which is not something that's required in the New Testament, but I think there is a recommendation still to, again, think of it in that way, not as a negative sense, but again, as something to help set free. I've heard many people speak of their experience of that as freeing, of kind of saying, okay, this amount we're dedicating to good works. One approach is, half of it to give through support of your local parish, and half through support of local charities and things like that. But again, the need is to kind of discern where you are in terms of your own life, your ability, your situation, but kind of make a plan that it's, in one sense, more important to look at the step you're making relative to your own situation rather than the overall compared to other people, that we're not compared ultimately to just try and beat other people and be better than them, but try to do the best we can, be the best steward we can. And again, it can be something that, do we find that we are trapped in some way by the wealth that we have, or is it something that we are allowing too much of it to just be used in ways that aren't really that fruitful for our own self or for others? How can we better, again, strategically work with that to bring a greater good from it? This whole mindset, looking this week, is trying to take that approach that Rocky takes preparing for his fight, that we're called to be in the world as intentional disciples, to follow Christ, to learn from him, to be transformed by him, to be in contact with his saving and transforming grace, but to bear as much fruit as we can. There's that invitation to that intentional approach. So where is it in our own life, through that concept of stewardship, that time that we have? Where is it, or what's kind of that plan to make, what's that goal that we work towards? Something to allow the life of God to be present to us, and then to work through us to bear good fruit in the world.